I am very passionate about innovation and change in the workforce, and this is what I do my research on. Like as Sarah mentioned, I spent several years, 4 years, working as an auditor, financial statement auditor. And some of you may say, how do you get from financial statement auditing to studying people in organizations, organizational behavior? And what happened to me as I was working as an auditor was that I recognized that the human side of the equation couldn't be boiled down into like debits and credits, right? There was something more going on here, and that people who had ability to lead other people, had greater career opportunities, and the firms and the organizations that they belonged to and led were more successful if they could pick up these important skills. And I just felt a passion around helping people to do that, and so decided to return to school and get a PhD so I could learn more about this stuff and study it. And share that knowledge with others. So I'm here to talk to you today about developing leadership skills that foster innovation in the workforce. And we've all heard about how the business environment is changing at an ever-increasing pace, right? That this change in the business environment borders on being very explosive. But just how fast are things changing? Just how rapidly are they changing? Based on his best-selling book, I think that Bill Gates would have us, the title of it, Business at the Speed of Thought. I think that Bill Gates would have us believe that, that change is happening so quickly today, that organizations need to be able to adapt so quickly, almost at the same rate that, that a thought travels across the synapses of our brain, which is very, very fast, between 0.2 milliseconds and 2 milliseconds. So, very quickly, I think they would have us believe this. And of course, this was used as a rhetorical device. It wasn't meant to describe how fast things are actually changing in the world. But nevertheless, things are changing very, very rapidly. We could talk about a number of different measures to help us understand just how quickly things are picking up in terms of change in the business place. We could talk about the rapidly changing nature of the workforce. We could talk about how product life cycles have shrunk dramatically over the last 50 years. We could talk about globalization and the competitive pressures that places on companies. So we could talk about a lot of different metrics and measure how quickly things are changing in the marketplace. And just in terms of these shrinking product life cycles, this has impacted nearly every conceivable product that we can think of out there. From all the way from seed corn through genetic alterations, all the way up to children's toys or whatever else. There are just a number of products. Almost every product we can think of has been impacted by this. And the impact of it, the result of it is that the average company earns 50% of its revenues from new products launched in the last 3 years alone. That's amazing. That's just, it's incredible, right? And although the changing nature of the workforce and globalization and product life cycle shrinkage, those are all interesting things to talk about in their own right. Let's talk about patents for just a minute. So on this graph up here on the screen, you can see that we've got patent activity in the United States summarized. So we've got along the horizontal axis time over the last 50 years here in the United States. And then along the vertical axis, we've got the number of patents being filed and granted. And the number of patents being filed are the blue bars you can see. And what we have is, you can see very clearly there's almost an exponential growth in the number of patents being filed. In the first time period we've got, 1963 to 67, about 500,000 patents being filed for. And by the most recent time period, after 50 years, over 2.5 million patents being filed for. That's tremendous growth. That's a lot of patents. That's 5 times. That's an increase. That's a 5-fold increase in the number of patents being filed. At the same time, we've had significant growth in the number of patents being granted, although not quite as dramatic as that of the patents that are being filed. But nevertheless, we have significant growth from 300,000 up to 1.2 million, a 4-fold increase in 50 years. So substantial growth. It's remarkable growth. And some of these patents, look, are these going to lead to products that impact the way we do business? I think absolutely. There's no question that these patents are going to lead to products that change the nature of the way we do business. Even if we're not in an innovative field or whatever it is, these are going to have an effect. And this is just a small sampling of the way in which the business environment is changing, and it's changing at an increasingly a rapid pace. So look, it's an amazing time to be alive in my view. As historians look back at the Industrial Revolution, they say, oh, that was an amazing time. It forever altered the destiny of humankind. And I think of the time in which we live as being quite a transformational time as well. 100 years from now, I think people will look back and say, oh my goodness, the information age, that was the time that really changed the way the world worked, right? So, it's just an amazing thing. Over the same time period as on this graph, we have another interesting trend that I think is kind of interesting, especially as we consider it with respect to the previous trend we've been talking about. And it is this, that there's been, this graph on this slide depicts the average number of years a company would expect to spend on the S&P 500 index from the year 1957 or 1960 or so up until about 2010. And as you can see that an S&P 500 index, for those who don't know what it is just basically a list of the largest publicly traded, the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the world as measured by market capitalization. So these big, enormous companies. And what we see is that there's an acceleration in how quickly a company kind of gets booted off of the S&P 500 index. So in 1960, a company could expect to spend about 60 years, a lot of longevity. They could expect to spend 60 years on the S&P 500 index. And by 1985, that had fallen to about 25 years. Currently, it's at about 17 or 18 years that a company could expect to stay on the S&P 500. So a lot of churn and burn. 80% of the companies that were there in 1960 no longer on the S&P 500 index today. Only one company from the inception of the index until today has been there continuously, and that's General Electric. One company. Through that entire, all of the history of keeping track of this has remained on this prestigious list. So there's a lot of sort of burn and churn that's happening. At the current rate of turnover, a company gets kicked off of the index about every 2 weeks. But every 2 weeks they get kicked off, another company does. And that means that in about 15 years, 75% of the companies will no longer be on the S&P 500 index. So look, that's just, it's quite an interesting trend. And I think if we take these two ideas, that there's increasing amount of change in the business environment, and that we have, even the best of companies can be impacted by this. I think the lesson for us at a very high level is that companies either adapt like General Electric has, or they fail. And we all recognize the need for innovation and change and improvement in organizations. We recognize the importance of it, that it's got to happen. And history is littered with accounts of companies that have failed because of a failure to innovate. So you may recognize some of our companies over here on the slide that are in our failure column. So history is littered with accounts of these companies that have failed, and recent history is no exception to that. Just this last fall of 2013, Dish Network, who was the owner of Blockbuster Video, they announced the closure of the final Blockbuster Video location in the US. And that was less than a decade. Less than 10 years after Blockbuster had 60,000 employees, 9,000 retail locations in the US. They were the king of the marketplace for rented media. No one was bigger than Blockbuster. I mean, maybe a Hollywood Video was in your town, but there was for certain a Blockbuster Video around the corner. Look, a decade, and they're gone. They were unable to adapt, at least according to industry analysts, unable to adapt quickly enough to the changes brought on by Netflix and Hulu and these alternative delivery systems for rented media. So look, it's a pretty important thing, I think, in being able to innovate. Although it may seem like, because of the increasing sort of churn in the economy, in the business marketplace, it may seem like it's a pretty dire situation. And I think there's hope for companies. And I want you to take a few seconds here to think about these products on the slide. So we have the Post-it note, we've got Google Earth, and we've got Amazon Prime. So what's the common thread between or among these three different products? They've all been wildly successful company, products for the companies that have them. But they also have one other thing that's, at least one other thing, probably some other things, but at least one other thing that makes them kind of unique and sets them apart, and it is this, is that they were all primarily the result of an employee suggestion. So we've got the Post-it note, developed by 3M, developed by a 3M scientist. It was released in about 1980, the product, developed by a 3M scientist who grew tired of, when he was singing in the church choir, grew tired of his little bookmarks falling out of his hymnal. Couldn't keep track of where he was supposed to sing, wanted something that would stay in place, so he went and put a little bit of glue on the back side of a piece of paper. A little bit of glue on the back side of a paper. And industry analysts think that you can't necessarily identify exactly how much money, how much revenue comes from a single product, but analysts think it's about $1 billion a year. A little bit of glue on the backside of a paper, $1 billion a year. Amazon Prime resulted from an employee suggestion. A guy named Charlie Ward, not the basketball player or football player at Florida State back in the mid-90s. Darren waves his hand because he's from Florida State. So, not that guy. This guy was a software developer. He wasn't in marketing, he wasn't in logistics, but he knew that there was a problem with the business model. And in his mind, the problem was with Amazon that online shopping, there was a major hindrance for most consumers. It was for me, it was for Charlie, and it is this, that shipping costs are a major problem. We don't buy stuff because we don't want to pay the shipping. And so his suggestion, simple one, free shipping to high-volume customers. Free shipping to high-volume customers. That program became what we call Amazon Prime. And if you know about the program, you pay a little nominal fee, like $99 a year or whatever, and one of the perks that you get is free 2-day shipping. I have Amazon Prime, it's great. And here's the best part for Amazon. When Amazon customers who sign up for Prime increase the volume of their transactions through Amazon by 150%. 150% increase. And it was this simple employee suggestion, hey, why not offer free shipping? Significant impact. And suggestions from employees don't need to be as bold or as creative or as big as these to have an impact on their organizations. There was a GM employee who working in a plant, and production line's here, my workstation's over there. He's a shop floor worker working on the production line. Have to travel back and forth a lot of times to pick up my tools. Can't we just have a cart where I can load a bunch of my stuff onto my cart, put it next to the production line, I don't have to walk back and forth nearly as often? And GM said, that sounds like a good idea. And so, so they buy carts for everybody, right? Carts for everybody on the production line. It reduces the amount of time for each employee to perform each work task by 2 full seconds. A reduction by 2 full seconds. And that doesn't seem like a big deal, right? So it's a small little suggestion. Work cart, 2 seconds per task. Estimated value of that, $900,000 per quarter in that plant alone. So just a small employee suggestion. Can I have a work cart, right? So this stuff can have an effect. And so the point of this is that employees can be a vast resource for innovation and improvement in organizations. And I say that they can because they often aren't. Recent survey found that 70% of employees have withheld improvement-oriented ideas from their bosses. 70% have withheld improvement-oriented ideas from their boss. Why would they do such a thing? Why would they do that? Is it because they want their organizations to fail? They don't think innovation is needed? They don't think it's important, necessary, that it's urgent, that we've got to have innovation? I don't think that's the right answer. They don't want their organizations to fail. They recognize the need for improvement and change. This is where some research can help us. Research indicates that there are 2 primary reasons why employees don't want to share their improvement-oriented ideas with their boss or with their manager or supervisor. Number 1, fear. They're afraid of how their boss is going to react. And just let me illustrate this really quickly. Got a friend who is an oral surgeon. When he was in school to become an oral surgeon, he, as is true of a lot of people when they're in medical school, had to work in a clinic for a number of hours each week to gain some experience. It was part of his schooling. And as they go into the clinic, the way it would work is you would be paired with another student. And then a number of pairs would be overseen by some sort of supervising physician or an attending physician or a surgeon. So one day he goes into the clinic, he's paired with another person, given a patient to care for. Patient needs a tooth extracted. Simple thing, but he's new to the clinic, not done this a lot of times. His partner assigned to anesthetize the tooth, numb the tooth. And my friend, his responsibility is to extract the tooth. That after several failed attempts at numbing the tooth, they can't quite figure it out. So they go and they decide they're going to go and ask the attending for some help. This was not a decision to be made lightly. The attending was a known jerk, a person who had verbally dressed down nearly every student who was in the clinic at one point or another had been castigated by this person. So not a decision to be made lightly, but they did it anyway. They needed some help, so they went and got this attending. Attending was not happy, but agreed to come and help. Comes in the room, grabs the syringe, and proceeds to numb the wrong tooth. The tooth on the exact opposite side of the mouth. So my friend's thinking, but at least he's just going to show us nothing's going to go wrong. We can then, when he leaves, we'll numb the right tooth. But then something worse happened. The surgeon called for the implement that would be used to extract the tooth. So not only did he numb the wrong tooth, he was now going to extract the wrong tooth. So now my friend's mind begins to race. Do I speak up and say something? No, I can't do that because this he's a jerk. He'll be really, really angry. Plus, it'd be in front of the patient. And that would destroy the patient's sense of credibility, right? Their perception of credibility for the surgeon. So can't speak up. What am I going to do? Plus, in addition to that, the guy has significant power over outcomes that are important to me. How well I do in the clinic, my grade in the clinic, and whether I can graduate or not. So he's got power over outcomes that are really important to me. So no, I can't speak up. Just as the surgeon is reaching towards the mouth with the implement to remove the tooth, a thought comes. Ask a question. And so he says, "Doctor, what are the benefits of anesthetizing the contralateral tooth?" Which is doctor speak for the tooth on the exact opposite side of the mouth. So quite clever that he asked that question. Doctor, surgeon looks at him like, "You're a complete idiot. Like, why would you ask me such a stupid question?" Right? He gives him that sort of glare. And then there's a look of sort of understanding that flashes across the surgeon's face. He reaches down to the counter, flips open the medical chart, realizes his mistake, and drops the implements, the surgical implements, into the tray, and then storms out of the room sort of angrily. Doesn't say anything, and doesn't speak to either of the two students about what just happened. So here's the point of that story. My friend was more afraid of his boss than he was concerned for the welfare of the patient, right? And so employees are often afraid to speak up and share their improvement-oriented ideas, and that can be a problem. The second reason that research indicates that employees are unwilling to speak up is because of a sense of futility. And you've probably experienced this yourself. And I experienced it as a financial statement auditor. I had a person that I worked with frequently who would come up with suggestions for, not suggestions, just ideas for ways that we can improve, would never actually go to the next step and talk about those ideas with anybody who could make a difference, who could put the ideas into practice. And the reason, one time I asked her, why don't you talk about these ideas with people? They're pretty good ideas. They could improve our processes. And her response was, well, yeah, I've tried in the past. It never goes anywhere. Put a lot of effort into thinking about how to frame what I'm going to say, what the solution is going to be, and then the managers and partners say, hey, yeah, we're going to do something. Never actually happens. So as a consequence, she had this sense of futility. It's worthless. It's a lot of time and effort on my part, no benefit. I'm going to take a risk in addition to, by speaking up. So it's just not worth my time. So a couple of problems. A sense of fear and a sense of futility prevent employees from speaking up. So the question for us is, what can leaders do? What can leaders do about these things to increase the amount of employee-driven innovation and change in the workplace? Fortunately, we've got a lot of research that helps us here as well. And the accumulated evidence indicates that there are really just three leader behaviors that drive employee innovation. So as you can see here on my chart, is that picking up? Great, thank you. So we've got three leader behaviors that significantly improve chances of employees coming up with innovative ideas and solutions. The first is to articulate a need for improvement. This includes providing a logical rationale for the need for improvement, in addition to telling stories that capture the imagination and emotion and hearts of the employees. So that's number one. Number two, to model innovation yourself. Be a model of innovation. Come up with a few suggestions, a couple of ways that you can improve work practices and procedures, work methods, products, whatever it is that you're working on. That demonstration of, hey, look, improvement is important around here can go a long way. Number three, is to empower action. And what I mean by this is to spend some time teaching employees how to solve work-related problems on their own. So I think a lot of times the tendency for managers is an employee comes with a work-related problem and the manager says, oh, I can solve that for you, instead of taking the time to help them learn how to solve their own problem. Does that make sense? So articulating a need, modeling innovation, and empowering action can all have a significant impact. And these things drive the generation of improvement-oriented ideas. So great state to be in. We've got improvement-oriented ideas being generated. Forgot the clicker. The next stage of the model, though, is where we run into a bit of trouble. So there are kind of two stages here in our model. The first are these behaviors that lead to the generation of improvement-oriented ideas, but that's not sufficient. It's not sufficient to get those ideas extracted from our employees. Because remember, the problem wasn't that employees didn't have suggestions for improvement. The problem was that they didn't feel comfortable sharing them. They had ideas, they just kept them to themselves 70% of the time. Right? So at least 70% of employees had done that at one point or another. So the problem is, how do you get employees then to share their ideas? Significant research also helps us here. 4 things that you can do. Praise, reward, all innovative behavior, not just those that you think are great and wonderful. Innovative behavior, suggestions, ideas for improvement, complement that, reward it, however you decide to do it, can significantly help. Number 2, showing respect to employees when they come up with a suggestion or a solution to an idea. Not criticizing, not being overly critical. Maybe an idea is not going to work, and that's okay. And you say that. You say, hey, look, thanks for that suggestion. It doesn't look like it's going to work out this time, but keep them coming. We need all the ideas that we can get. Number 3, encourage experimentation. Encourage employees to come up with new ways, to try out new ways of doing stuff in the organization. And number 4 is to take action as soon as possible so that there's not the sense of futility. Take action and try to implement suggestions that are good. Those that are deemed to be good, try to implement as quickly as you can, and seek out resources that the employees will need to implement their suggestions and ideas, and give them some ownership of it, but help them to get support them by giving them the resources that they need. Now, so we've got these 2 pieces, right? We've got this leadership stuff that drives the generation of improvement-oriented ideas, and we've got this leadership stuff that encourages the sharing of those ideas. Unfortunately, a lot of managers fall into this bottom bucket that I'm going to show you next. So we have the problem where instead of doing the stuff on the top that encourages the sharing of ideas, we do something else instead. We punish innovation failures. By continually reminding employees, hey, remember that time when that didn't work out? So we tend to punish them for failing. Sometimes we ridicule or criticize new ideas. Maybe we even do this unintentionally. We don't want to, but we do. And the next thing is that oftentimes we reward our HR systems. We reward status quo adherence. Once again, that may be inadvertently. We don't intend to, but we do that. And then finally, failing to take action. Failing to take action creates this sense of futility. Let me just illustrate really quick with an example from my own work experience really quick here about how this model works. So when I first started working for the CPA firm that I started working for, we had in the fall a retreat for all junior staff members. And we went away, and the partners and the managers told us a lot of stuff. And the final thing was, hey, we need you guys to be on the constant lookout for improvement-oriented ideas, ways that we can improve the way we do stuff around here. This is what we had. So we had this brainstorming session, a day-long brainstorming session. Everybody left really excited, so we need to be on the lookout. We're on the front lines of the organization. We need to help us improve. Fast forward several months, I'm working on a tax return for a guy who had done a fair amount of stock trading in the previous year. Wasn't a broker or anything like that, but had done some stock trading in the previous year. So I had this 20-page brokerage statement that I needed to summarize and enter into the tax software. And for those of you who aren't accountants, that's kind of, especially if you're new, it's kind of a brutal thing. So the way that I would normally do that is to do it manually. I have a 10-key calculator with a little printout on the backside. Maybe you've seen these. They're adding machines. They're kind of ancient technology, but you type on it and you sum it up. And that was the way that I was supposed to do this, which was fine. But I decided to do it differently this time. I took that 20-page document down to our high-speed scanning machine that was downstairs from my office, and I scanned it in, and we had this optical text recognition software, and I turned that file into a Microsoft Excel file. And then I summarized it that way, and I entered it in the tax software, and I got all my working papers together, and I submitted it back to the partner, and he was not very happy about that. He got this file, he was pretty angry about it, called me into his office and proceeded to lecture me on the importance of following established protocol and procedures. Because, I had just wasted a lot of time, and it's probably true that it took me longer to do this because it was the first time I had done it, right? It probably took me longer than the manual method. But nevertheless, he lectured me on following established protocols and procedures. So I got the message really quickly. We had the leadership behaviors that led to the generation of the idea. But then on the back side of this, he told me, hey, look, I said it was important. I was one of those partners that said we needed innovation. But then, look, the reality is it's not important to me. You just need to follow the established procedures and protocols around here. So I got the message, right? And we have to be very careful about that. So in summary, the lesson is this. Look, the rate of change in the business place, in the business environment, is really, really accelerating. And so companies have got to either adapt or fail. And the second part of that is that employees can help with this. They're a vast resource, although oftentimes they don't share their ideas. And so the key takeaway is that their willingness to help. So they can help, but their willingness to help depends on leadership. So for the next 5 minutes, I want you to spend some time thinking about these questions that I've got up on the slide here. Are the leaders in your organization doing well at leading innovation? Are they doing well at it? If there's room for improvement, what can be done? What can be done to improve how they're leading innovation? And finally, what one idea from this presentation was most valuable to you? And how can you implement that idea into your work as a leader? Now, after about 5 minutes, we'll come back together, and if there are a few who are willing to share the insights they gathered, we'll spend some time talking about those. But if you can go for the next 5 minutes or so, just thinking of, by yourself there at your tables, thinking of ideas, ways that you can encourage and improve innovation in your organizations. Thanks.